The world turned upside down in an instant. Just yesterday, he was an ordinary human. Today, his consciousness awakens in pitch-black darkness, squeezed inside a tight, cold space. With great effort, he cracks the shell and crawls out, only to freeze in absolute shock. Instead of hands, clawed paws. Instead of skin, shimmering scales. And behind him, he feels the unfamiliar weight of small, still fragile wings. He has been reincarnated as a dragon, and not just any dragon, but a legendary creature that, according to every trope in this world, is supposed to inspire pure terror. There's just one tiny problem. The mirror in the luxurious chamber reflects not a majestic monster, but a plump, cat-sized, scaly thing with an outrageously grumpy and hilariously adorable face. Me, the evil dragon? I look like a living plush toy, races through his mind. Before he can fully process the scale of the tragedy, the doors burst open. His Highness the Prince enters, cold, statuesque, a young man whose icy gaze radiates royal majesty laced with concealed danger. He stops, staring at the monster that just hatched from the artifact egg. Desperate to save face, the little dragon decides to deliver the most terrifying roar in fantasy history. He fills his lungs, his throat begins to glow crimson, and, instead of incinerating flames, out comes a tiny smoke ring and an embarrassingly loud puff. The prince raises one elegant eyebrow. A faint smirk ghosts across his usually impassive face. He approaches slowly. The dragon, still frantically trying to look intimidating, bristles every tiny spine along his neck. Instead of drawing a sword and slaying the evil creature, His Highness simply reaches out and, without ceremony, scoops the dragon up by the scruff, lifting him to eye level. And this is the legendary Empire Destroyer? The prince's voice is low, dripping with mockery. You look more like a burnt dinner roll with wings. Burnt? Dinner roll? I'll reduce you to ash, the protagonist rages internally, flailing all four paws in midair. He snaps at the prince's finger only to receive a deft flick on the nose in return. In that instant, a magical spark flares between them. The familiar contract seals itself automatically. Now, this terrifying dragon officially belongs to the most dangerous man in the kingdom. The prince presses the furiously puffing little dragon against his chest. To the dragon's horror, he realizes the prince's hands are nowhere near as cold as they appear. Fine, the dragon thinks, gradually going still while already plotting revenge. I'll make you regret this, but first, I'm starving, like really starving. The chapter ends with the prince carrying his new fearsome pet out into the garden while the tiny dragon is already eyeing the golden button on His Highness's tunic, seriously wondering whether it would taste good. Morning in the Imperial Palace doesn't begin with coffee. It begins with utter chaos in the Crown Prince's chambers. Our protagonist, still far from accepting his fate as a tame pet, has decided that the best way to announce his grandeur is total destruction. While the prince sleeps, the little dragon enthusiastically tests the durability of the royal curtains. His claws may be small, but they're sharp enough to turn priceless silk into elegant fringe in record time. Let him know who he's dealing with. I am terror flying on wings of night, he thinks proudly, right before getting hopelessly tangled in the fabric and crashing to the parquet floor along with the entire curtain rod in a spectacular thud. The noise jolts the prince awake. His Highness props himself up on his elbows, hair in glorious disarray, eyes still clouded with sleep, which, unexpectedly, makes him look far less terrifying than usual. He stares at the heap of shredded silk from which an angrily twitching tail protrudes. Instead of summoning the guards, the prince lets out a long-suffering sigh and drawls, "If you eat those curtains, you'll give yourself indigestion, and treating dragon flatulence is not on my schedule today." He rises and approaches the disaster zone. With casual efficiency, he untangles the dragon from the wreckage. The little creature tries to muster his most murderous glare, but his stomach betrays him with an embarrassingly loud, pitiful growl. The magical familial bond works both ways. The prince immediately feels the sharp pang of his familiar's hunger. Breakfast turns into yet another battle of wills. Exquisite dishes are set before the prince. In front of the dragon is placed a bowl of high-quality hunting dog meat. The protagonist freezes in outrage. Meat? Dog meat? Are you serious? I am a supreme being. Where are my wine-soaked delicacies and golden pollen? In a fit of fury, he kicks the bowl. Chunks of meat scatter across the priceless carpet. Nose held high, the dragon leaps straight onto the table and marches toward the prince's plate. With great determination, he sinks his tiny teeth into a juicy piece of smoked ham intended for His Highness. The servants freeze in horror, fully expecting the prince to incinerate the insolent creature on the spot. But His Highness merely watches with faint melancholy as the minuscule lizard struggles to swallow a chunk bigger than its own head. "Delicious?" the prince asks softly, propping his cheek on one hand. "Just so you know, that ham cost about as much as a small village. You're in debt now." "Debt? I'm doing you a favor by taste testing your food," the dragon mentally snapped back. But then he feels an unfamiliar warmth. The prince has begun to gently scratch behind his ear. This is a forbidden move. The dragon tries to resist. Really, he does, but his draconic nature betrays him. Against his will, he starts making a sound suspiciously like contented purring. His eyes drift shut of their own accord. The moment of illicit bliss is shattered by the arrival of the advisor. The man announces that today the prince must attend the Council of Elders and present his new familiar. The little dragon instantly tenses. He understands. They intend to parade him like some exotic curiosity, a trophy. "Come along, great evil." The prince lifts him and deposits him on his shoulder. "Time to show them that I've tamed, well, or at least acquired, a very demanding scaly cat." The council chamber greeted them with the heavy scent of incense and even heavier stares from the elders. Perched proudly on the prince's shoulder, our protagonist gives it everything he's got. He puffs out his tiny chest, spreads his delicate membranous wings as wide as they'll go, and pulls the fiercest scowl his adorable face can manage. The effect is exactly the opposite. A ripple of stifled chuckles and murmurs sweeps through the hall. Is that the legendary familiar? He looks more like a mantelpiece ornament. "Go ahead and laugh, pathetic humans," the little dragon seethes inwardly. "When I grow up, I'll start devouring this world, beginning with your gray beards." The first advisor steps into the center of the room, a slippery man whose eyes gleam with barely concealed glee at the chance to undermine the prince. He bows with exaggerated deference, but his voice drips poison. "Your Highness, according to the law, if a familiar fails to demonstrate magical ability within the first 24 hours, it is deemed defective and must be transferred to the Department of Research for thorough examination." The prince visibly tenses. The fingers that had been idly stroking the dragon's back freeze. Sale, as he has silently named his pet, feels the cold fury rolling off the prince in waves. "Department of Research? That's vivisecation. They're going to take me apart piece by piece." Panic flashes through the hero, only to be instantly replaced by pure, concentrated rage. "My dragon requires no such tests," the prince replies icily. "His power is self-evident." "Then let him prove it," the advisor sneers, producing a magical detection crystal and holding it forward. "If you can so much as change the color of the stone, we will acknowledge his status." The prince lifts the little dragon toward the crystal. The hero understands. This is the moment his fate is decided. He squeezes his eyes shut, reaching deep inside his tiny body for that ancient spark of chaos he once read about in legends. He strains so hard his tiny claws begin to tremble. Suddenly, where the usual pathetic puff should have come, a real vortex of heat swirls to life in his belly. The dragon's jaws snap wide. Instead of fire, a powerful surge erupts. Thick black smoke threaded with glittering golden sparks. The crystal doesn't just change color, it fractures with a deafening crack and shatters into 1,000 glittering shards. One fragment whistles past the advisor's nose, forcing him to stumble back in terror. The hall falls to absolute, deathly silence. Every eye is locked on the small creature, who is now panting heavily, twin, thin streams of smoke curling proudly from his nostrils. "It would seem the test is concluded," the prince says calmly. A faint, triumphant smile curves his lips. He turns on his heel and strides out without waiting for bows or formalities. Once they reached the empty corridor, the prince gently lifts the dragon from his shoulder and brings him close, gazing straight into those golden eyes. "You've got quite the temper," he murmurs softly. "Thank you. Sail." Exhausted from the massive energy release, the little dragon manages only a weak huff before pressing his snout into the prince's neck. "Fine, Your Highness, you saved me today. Consider one set of curtains forgiven. Just one." With that final thought, he instantly falls asleep, feeling, strangely enough, completely and utterly safe. Here is the English translation of your chapter. After his triumph in the throne room, the prince decides that the little dragon needs some fresh air and takes him along to the enclosed imperial garden. Our protagonist, sprawled across His Highness's shoulder, feels like the absolute king of the situation. He's already starting to get used to the prince's steady stride, and even to the way he sometimes thoughtfully runs his fingers over the dragon's scales. In principle, if you ignore the fact that I'm the size of a baguette, life is pretty good, the dragon muses philosophically, lazily watching butterflies flutter by. But the idyll doesn't last long. In the gazebo, a surprise is already waiting, a young duchess notorious for her capricious temperament and for the fact that the emperor has her in mind as the prince's future bride. The moment she spots our hero, her eyes light up with greedy fire. "Oh, Prince, is this that little monster everyone's talking about?" She glides toward them, enveloping the dragon in a sharp cloud of cloying perfume. "How unusual he is. Looks like a lizard that's been left in the oven far too long." "Lizard? Oven?" The dragon snaps instantly out of sleep mode. "Listen, woman, I am ancient evil. Back off to a safe distance before I sneeze in the direction of your skirt." The duchess doesn't wait for permission. She reaches out with her manicured hands to grab him. The prince makes a subtle movement with his shoulder, pulling the dragon out of reach of her fingers. "Careful, Lady Eliza. He doesn't like being touched by strangers. He can be unpredictable." "Oh, come now. It's just a little pet." She refuses to give up, and with a quick lunge, manages to pinch the very tip of the dragon's wing. That's the final straw. The main character decides it's time for high-level diplomacy. He doesn't bite her, that would be too straightforward. Instead, he fills his mouth with saliva and, very neatly but extremely accurately, spits it right onto the Duchess's expensive silk glove. Even a small dragon's saliva turns out to be sticky and suspiciously pungent. "Eek! He spat on me! Disgusting creature!" Eliza shrieks, shaking her hand frantically. The prince barely holds back a smile, covering his mouth with his palm. "I did warn you. He has very refined taste. It seems your perfume doesn't agree with him." Furious, the duchess storms off, vowing to complain to the emperor. But as soon as she disappears around the bend, the prince gently sets the little dragon on the grass and looks at him seriously. "You've just made yourself a dangerous enemy, little one. Eliza's family controls the supply of magic stones to the castle. If they cut off the flow, you'll have nothing to eat to grow." The dragon freezes. He looks at his tiny paws, then up at the prince. Suddenly, everything becomes clear. He isn't just a decoration here, he's a piece in a large political game where everyone wants to take a bite of him. But instead of fear, he feels a surge of excitement. "Then I need to grow faster," he decides, already marching determinedly toward the nearest bush of magic berries.
"Prince, get your wallet ready. I'm going to become a very expensive and very large shield against your ex-fiancés." The chapter ends with the prince sitting on the grass beside the little dragon as they both watch the sunset. Between them grows a bond that has long since outgrown the simple master and servant contract.
Deep night in the imperial palace. The main character has cozily settled on a silk pillow right at the head of the prince's bed. His draconic senses are razor sharp. He catches the faintest rustle behind the door and feels the currents of magic circulating through the walls. The prince sleeps restlessly. Through their familiar bond, Sile can sense that His Highness is plagued by nightmares filled with cold and crushing loneliness. Even such icy beauties have their own demons, the little dragon thinks, cracking one eye open. Suddenly, the air in the room changes. A barely perceptible smell of burning, and something acrid appears. Thick purple mist begins to seep under the massive entrance door. Magical sleeping gas mixed with a paralyzing poison. Sile leaps to his feet, scales bristling. He understands instantly. These aren't mere thieves. These are professional assassins, sent either for him or for the prince. He tries to wake the prince with a paw, but the poison acts fast. His Highness is already sunk into an artificial coma. "Damn it, looks like I'll have to handle this myself," the dragon fumes. The door opens soundlessly. Two masked shadows slip into the chambers. In their hands are special anti-magic chains designed to capture legendary creatures. "Look," one whispers, pointing at the bed. "The little bastard didn't even wake up. Grab him quick and the Marquis will pay handsomely." An assassin reaches towards Sile, but in that moment, the dragon stops being a cute little bun. Ancient pride flares in his tiny heart. He will not allow himself, the great dragon, even if currently the size of a baguette, to be snatched by some low-ranking scum. Instead of breathing fire, Sile concentrates all his inner heat into a single point. For an instant, his small body blazes with blinding golden light. A partial transformation occurs. The shadow of the dragon on the wall suddenly swells to the size of a colossal horned monster. Sile lets out a short but impossibly powerful roar that spreads not as sound, but as a mental shockwave. The assassins are hurled back against the wall, their masks crack. Taking advantage of their disorientation, the little dragon leaps onto the prince's chest and exhales pure magical energy straight into his face, neutralizing the poison. The prince's eyes snap open. In an instant, his hand finds the dagger hidden under the pillow. Assessing the situation in a heartbeat, he springs up and with one precise motion pins one of the attackers to the floor. The second, in sheer terror, tries to dive for the window. "Going somewhere?" The prince's voice is quieter than death itself. A flick of his hand, and ice chains erupt from the floor, locking the fleeing man in place. When the guards finally burst into the room and drag the criminals away, silence returns. The prince turns to Sile. The little dragon looks utterly drained. His scales have dulled, and he can barely stand on trembling paws after that burst of power. His Highness gently lifts him into his arms and presses him close, so tightly that Sile can hear the frantic hammering of the prince's heart. "You saved me, again," the prince whispers, burying his face in the dragon's soft wings. Sile only manages a weak snort, trying to feign indifference, but inside he's pleased. "Of course I'm watching over you. Who's going to feed me if they slit your throat?" he thinks, already drifting off right in the prince's arms. Now he knows, true power sleeps inside him, and it awakens only when the human who belongs to him is in mortal danger. The morning after the assassination attempt dawned overcast and gloomy. The main character woke not to sunlight, but to a heavy, hollow emptiness in his stomach. Yesterday's massive magical outburst and the fleeting transformation into the shadow of the true dragon had burned through every last calorie he possessed. He tried to stand, but his paws slid apart on the silk sheet like those of a newborn fawn. The price for heroic flair turned out higher than I expected. Sayal noted gloomily, feeling like a deflated balloon. The prince was already up. He stood by the window, dressed in a formal black military tunic, issuing cold, clipped orders to the head of the secret guard. From the look on his face, heads would roll in the palace that night. But the moment His Highness heard the faint rustling on the bed, his gaze instantly softened. With a gesture, he dismissed the guards and approached Sayal. "Awake, my little guardian?" The prince carefully lifted the dragon into his hands. "You're freezing. Your inner flame is almost out." Instead of his usual threats and growls, Sayal only managed a pitiful squeak and bury his snout in the prince's palm. "Food. Give me everything edible within a 10-meter radius," he transmitted through their bond. At that moment, the doors flew open and servants carried in several trays. But this time, there was no meat or porridge. On silver platters lay glittering mana crystals soaked in honey from rare flowers and fruits grown in magical springs. The prince personally picked up one crystal and brought it to the dragon's snout. The instant Sayal's teeth touched the magical treat, a wave of warmth surged through his body. His scales visibly regained their deep, iridescent sheen, and the mischievous spark reignited in his eyes. "Oh, now this is service. This is what I call a hero's pension fund." Sayal began devouring the food at such speed that the prince could barely keep up, handing him fresh pieces one after another. While the little dragon restored his strength, the prince spoke, his voice thick with grim resolve. "The trail leads to my elder brother, the first prince. He isn't afraid of me. He's afraid of you, Sayal. The prophecy says that the true dragon will choose the one worthy of the throne, and since you chose me, he'll do anything to eliminate you." Sayal froze mid-bite, a chunk of fruit still in his mouth. "So now I'm also a political symbol. As if being tiny wasn't enough, I'm a living banner too?" He looked at the prince and saw not hunger for power, but genuine worry for him, for the tiny lizard. Suddenly, Sayal felt a strange itching along his back. His wings, previously soft and useless, began to harden, and a golden rim appeared along the edges of his scales. The absorption of highly concentrated mana accelerated his growth. He was now noticeably larger, no longer the size of a baguette, but a respectable loaf of bread. The prince noticed the change and gently touched the new golden scales. "You're growing too fast. If this continues, I won't be able to keep you hidden in the castle. We need to leave for the northern borders, to my personal estates. There you can train without prying eyes." To the north, into the mountains, Sayal pictured snow, caves, and the complete absence of soft pillows. "Hey, Your Highness, do they serve those honey-soaked crystals up there? If not, I demand a contract renegotiation." But looking at the prince's serious face, the little dragon understood. The games were over. Ahead lay harsh training and preparation for a real war for the throne. He spread his newly strengthened wings and let out a confident puff, this time sending a shower of sparks that singed the edge of the tablecloth. The journey began under the strictest secrecy. No gilded carriages. The prince and a small group of loyal knights donned plain traveling cloaks to avoid drawing the eyes of the first prince's spies. Sayal, now noticeably heavier, was comfortably nestled inside a specially tailored leather pouch worn against His Highness's chest. Only the dragon's snout poked out, wearing an expression of profound displeasure. "Seriously? Stealth mode? I look like a coin purse with teeth," the little dragon grumbled inwardly, swaying in time with the horse's steps. The farther they traveled from the capital, the colder the air became. Lush green meadows gave way to stark cliffs and dense coniferous forests, where the trees seemed older than the empire itself. Sayal was the first to sense it. The air here was saturated with wild mana. Unlike the refined crystals in the castle, this mana was sharp, raw, and primal. His scales began to vibrate involuntarily, responding to the ancient call. At a rest stop at the foot of the Great Ridge, something strange happened. While the knights kindled a fire, Sayal crawled out of his pouch and, wobbling on newly strengthened legs, wandered toward a thick wall of underbrush.
Suddenly, dozens of glowing eyes fixed on him from the shadows of the trees. They were forest spirit wolves, creatures made entirely of mist and magical frost. Normally, they never attacked humans, but the dragon's aura had drawn them like a beacon. The prince instantly reached for his sword the moment he saw his familiar surrounded. "Sail, back here," he shouted, already preparing an ice spell. But the little dragon didn't flinch. On the contrary, a strange surge of arrogance flooded him. Ancient knowledge that did not belong to his human self rose to the surface, draconic ancestral memory. He straightened, the golden rim along his scales flaring brightly in the twilight. Instead of retreating to the prince, he took a deliberate step toward the pack leader and released a low, resonant growl that made the stones beneath their feet tremble. It wasn't a cry of pain or fear, it was a command. The spirit wolves, who had been baring their teeth a second earlier, suddenly flattened their ears and in perfect unison lowered their heads to the ground. Sail slowly paced before them, as though reviewing a parade. In that moment, he no longer resembled a slightly overbaked bun. His posture and gaze carried the fleeting shadow of the world breaker the elders had once feared. The prince froze, slowly lowering his sword. For the first time, he witnessed his pet effortlessly asserting dominance over other magical beings. "Watch and learn, Your Highness." Sail turned back toward the prince, squinting with smug satisfaction. "While you're swinging your metal stick around, I'm simply explaining to them who's in charge of the food bowls." Once the wolves melted back into the forest, Sail, utterly exhausted from that display of dominance, promptly collapsed onto his side. The prince hurried over, scooped him up, and wrapped him tenderly in his own warm cloak. "It seems the North holds more for you than just training," the prince murmured quietly, pressing the dragon close. "It looks like a throne is waiting, one I didn't even know existed." Sail could only manage a feeble snort. He had realized one crucial thing. Here, in the wildlands, his power grew many times faster. But along with power came hunger, and right now, the smell of roasting meat from the night's fire interested him far more than any title as king of the forest spirits.
After a week of grueling travel through blizzards, the party finally caught sight of Black Peak Fortress. It was a grim structure, literally gnawed into the summit of the cliff. The walls of dark obsidian were covered in intricate runes that glowed with cold blue light, repelling ice monsters. "At last! If there's no hot bath and a mountain of pillows in there, I will personally melt this castle down to the foundations." Sail poked his snout out from under the prince's cloak, greeting the stinging snowflakes with his face. At the gates, they were met by an honor guard, but instead of joyful greetings, the warriors formed a stern line. Forward stepped the commander, a huge man with a scar running across his entire face, General Varg. He was the prince's old mentor, and the only one who dared speak to him without excessive ceremony. "Your Highness, you have brought with you either our salvation or our doom," Varg grumbled, shifting his heavy gaze to the pouch where Sail sat. "We received word from the capital. The Emperor has declared that anyone harboring the cursed lizard will be branded a traitor to the state." The prince didn't even flinch. He dismounted and adjusted the pouch with the dragon. "In this fortress, the laws of the Empire have never held sway, Varg. Here, steel and loyalty rule. Are you still loyal to me?" The general stared silently at the prince for a long moment, then his gaze moved to Sail. Sensing the challenge, the little dragon decided to add some fire. He crawled out of the pouch, climbed onto the prince's shoulder, spread wings that had grown larger and now bore sharp bone tips, and released a stream of bright golden flame into the sky. The fire was so intense that the snow within a 5-meter radius instantly turned to steam. The soldiers involuntarily took a step back. Varg grunted, and a flicker of grudging respect passed through his eyes. Fire breath in the heart of the frozen mountains. Bold. Come inside, but be warned, there is a guest in the castle right now whom you will not be pleased to see. Inside the fortress, a surprise awaited them. In the great hall, warming herself by the enormous fireplace, sat a woman in a severe gray dress bearing the emblem of the Inquisition. This was High Judge Mirabelle, a woman whose fanaticism frightened even the emperor.
Prince, what a meeting. She rose slowly, her rosary beads clinking softly. I have come officially to confirm whether your familiar is demonic spawn or not. But she turned her gaze on Sale as though she wanted to dissect him with her eyes alone. This creature has already crossed the boundary of human understanding. Sale felt a dull rage stir inside him. This woman smelled of blood and ancient magic. He pressed himself closer to the prince's neck, feeling the man's muscles tense beneath his tunic. "He's not a creature, Mirabelle," the prince said coldly. "He is the heir to ancient flame, and if you attempt to place your chains on him, I will forget that we share the same blood." The chapter ends at the moment when Mirabelle smiles enigmatically, and Sale notices that in the corner of the hall stands a strange iron box emitting a vibration that feels like the heartbeat of another dragon. Looks like rehabilitation is cancelled. The survival games are beginning, and this woman has brought something that was made specifically for creatures like me.
The atmosphere in the Great Hall of Black Peak Fortress had reached a boiling point. High Inquisitor Mirabelle continued to bore into Sale with her gaze, while the iron box in the corner vibrated more violently, emitting a low hum that made the little dragon's ears feel blocked. "What is in that box, Mirabelle?" The prince's voice cracked like breaking ice. His hand never left the hilt of his sword as he shielded Sale with his body. "Merely a heresy detector, Your Highness," the Inquisitor replied in an oily tone, slowly approaching the metal container. "But it only reacts when it senses nearby a piece of itself." With a sharp motion, she tore the heavy chain from the latch. The walls of the box parted, and Sale froze, unable to look away. Inside, shackled in hundreds of runic chains, lay a severed dragon horn. It was coal black, but crimson energy pulsed through its cracks, perfectly mirroring the rhythm of Sale's own heartbeat. Is this part of me? Or someone who came before me? Fragments of alien memories flashed through the protagonist's mind. Screams, fire, and the cold dungeons of the Inquisition. The horn reacted to the presence of a living dragon. The magical resonance was so powerful that Sale lifted him into the air. His scales no longer glowed gold. They blazed with furious scarlet flame. He felt unbearable pain. The horn was trying to drain his life force to restore itself. "You see?" Mirabelle pointed at the glowing little dragon. "This creature resonates with the remains of the great calamity that destroyed the previous dynasty. It is no familiar. It is the key to the end of the world. Seize him." Inquisitorial guards who had been lurking in the shadows raised their magical crossbows, but the prince was faster. He snatched Sale out of the air, pressing him to his chest, then kicked over the massive table, flipping it to create an improvised shield. "Varg!" the prince shouted to the general. "Which side will you take? Your oath to the emperor or the vow you swore to my father?" General Varg hesitated for a heartbeat, watching the little dragon writhe in magical agony. Then his heavy axe whistled down, splitting the stone floor tiles. "In this fortress, we do not bow to executioners in gray robes. Swords out, protect the prince and his beast." A short but ferocious battle erupted. Varg's knights clashed with the inquisitorial fanatics right in the middle of the Great Hall. Despite the agony of the resonance, Sale understood if he didn't silence that horn, they would all die here. Gathering his last strength, he tore free from the prince's grasp, and instead of fleeing, he flew straight toward the black horn. "You want my power? Take it all at once," he thought furiously. And instead of fire, he unleashed a torrent of pure, unfiltered soul magic onto the artifact. An explosion followed. A blinding flash of light momentarily blinded everyone present. When the prince's vision cleared, he saw Sale standing atop the shattered remains of the box. The horn had crumbled to dust, and between the dragon's small horns, on his forehead, now grew a new bony ornament, a tiny black protrusion resembling a crown. Mirabelle, breathing heavily, backed towards the exit. You absorbed it.
You have just signed the death warrant for this northern refuge, Prince. The Emperor will learn that your beast now wields the power of the calamity. She vanished into the smoke before the guards could seize her. Sale turned to the prince. His eyes no longer glowed gold, they burned with deep violet light. He had grown slightly larger again, and his appearance now inspired not tenderness, but primal awe. Well then, Your Highness. Sale heavily settled on the prince's shoulder, feeling a new dark power churning inside him. It seems we've just officially declared war on the entire empire. I hope you've got plenty of food stockpiled in the cellars, because after that little snack, I'm going to need a lot of calories.